Welcome everyone to today's presentation. My name is Mike Bowers. I am the Center Director for the Ohio Small Business Development Center, and we are excited to be able to put together today's presentation for small business owners called Battle Tested Strategy for High Stakes Negotiations, along with the Dublin Entrepreneurial Center. And when I look at a title like that, that's exciting stuff, I think, because it's high stakes, right? So anyway, again, like I said, my name is Mike Bowers. I'm with the SBDC. If you're not familiar with the Small Business Development Center, Small Business Development Center is designed to provide support to business owners, all the way from I have an idea and I want to start a business and I don't know anything about business, to existing businesses, probably like many of you, who are looking to get an edge and continue to grow and take that next step and build your businesses. Our advising services that we provide are free of charge to you. We also do a variety of different training programs. This particular training program, as I mentioned, is being done in partnership with the Dublin Entrepreneurial Center. And we are a longtime partner of the deck. And as a matter of fact, I am actually sitting in the deck today, participating in this workshop. So I want to introduce the manager for the Dublin Entrepreneurial Center, or the deck, as we like to call it. And he's going to talk a little bit about some of the things you can expect here at the deck. Chaz Fertel.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for the introduction and for the opportunity to have a chance to work with you and the Ohio SBDC and the local group out of Columbus State for so many years. The Dublin Entrepreneurial Center has been in existence since 2009, and we have grown to what is quite possibly the largest entrepreneur center in the United States, which we're very proud of for Central Ohio and specifically for Dublin. But like SBDC, we like to provide programming. We like to provide free consulting and guidance, and SBDC and Mike and his team are certainly a significant part of that guidance that we provide on site, and as well as providing space. So we currently have approximately 150 businesses on site at the deck, and we're proud of those businesses and how we're able to maybe come alongside them in any way and help them to have a greater chance of succeeding. But excited today to listen to SJ and this great event, Battle Tested Strategies for High Stakes Negotiations. I haven't heard SJ give this before, so I'm excited to hear him share it. And thank you so much for the opportunity to be a partner in this event.
Great, thanks a lot, Chaz. Chaz has put his contact information in the chat, so I'd encourage you to go check that out. And don't hesitate to reach out to Chaz about some of your small business needs, whether that be space or just support. My experience working with Chaz is he's definitely a great connector to resources and can definitely be of support to you. So what I want to do is I'm going to introduce our speaker. So SJ Barakony is going to be speaking today. I've known SJ for probably about 3 years, and I think he'll talk a little bit about that. But we got the opportunity to really work closer with SJ through our CARES COVID-19 recovery program that we put on. SJ is one of our contractors or business experts that work with entrepreneurs that have been impacted by COVID-19 to support their ability to, come back from the pandemic and kind of move forward. So SJ's done a tremendous job with us and with the entrepreneurs that he's worked with. SJ does a fabulous job of also connecting, and he's got a wealth of business knowledge. So I'm excited to have him here today, and I'm going to go without any more hesitation, turn it over to SJ for today's presentation. SJ.
Thank you so much, Chaz, and thank you, Mike. And also a thank you to Bruce, who's going to help monitor the chat, because I'm going to encourage you all. If you have a question that pops up, type it in the chat. If you have some feedback, type it in the chat. And actually, I think most of you have been on at least one Zoom over the last 18 months. Feel free also to introduce yourself in the chat. I won't be able to keep up on all that, but Bruce will keep an eye on it. And I'll leave a couple minutes at the tail end for a little Q&A. There's one of my slides, we'll get into that. So we're going to go ahead and launch here. And my intent, of course, is to make this interactive. So I might even stop for a moment and sort of pause to see if anyone wants to jump in. And that would be verbally as well. So let's go ahead and start with the first slide that you already see. So you've already heard the title mentioned a few times. And we are talking about a person or an organization, A and B, or it obviously could have multiple moving parts. And they literally can sometimes be in a battle. It's a metaphysical, metaphorical battle. And if you have strategies that you can employ when it comes to negotiations, you're already going to be ahead of the curve. And this presentation is going to get into some of that. So we're going to go ahead and start. And again, you already heard this. So this is a collaboration between the deck and the SBDC, and I am, again, your speaker facilitator. So today's content is fully inspired by this book here, Never Split the Difference. And I am encouraging you to invest in purchasing this book to build further on the vision, on the strategies and the tactics that we're going to get into today, because there won't be a way for me to cover everything. I'm going to hit highlights on the slides, and I'm going to encourage you to become or continue your lifelong learning journey, your self-directed education, your professional personal development, and purchase this book and read it at your next available opportunity. So we're going to start out, and that first link, I sent that to Bruce before we started. That is the actual survey link, and it's a poll question. And I'm going to go ahead and also quickly stop sharing the presentation and show it to you on the screen. So there it is right there. Have you ever heard of this book or its author before right now? So yes and yes, you've heard of the book and or the author. Yes and no, maybe you're not sure. No, not the book, but you've heard of Mr. Voss. Or a double no, and you're already learning a lot in the first 3 minutes. So feel free to do the poll. I did put the link in there via Bruce. Or if you want to just even simplify it further, you can just type your answer in the chat without even the poll. So we'll get back to that later. I just wanted to see what kind of knowledge you had of this content before we dived in. So we're going to go ahead and resume the poll, or resume today. And we're going to start getting into some of the principles now. And again, as I said a few minutes ago, I'm not going to be able to cover everything, nor do I want to. I want this to be a little more interactive, and I want to leave some time for Q&A, and I want to allow this material to breathe. I don't want to throw so much at you in a fire hose that you get drowned, rather than getting a cup of information which will help you in your day-to-day business. So the principles that Mr. Voss starts out with, here's 4 of them. Goal, prepare, your tone, and mirroring. So a few thoughts on each of these is, when you think about a goal, people, B2B, B2C in your business, they want to be understood and they want to be accepted. They want to have some safety and security, and they want to feel in control. So the more you can listen to them and demonstrate empathy and a desire to better understand the other person's experience. That is a key part of the high stakes strategy that you'll engage in as part of negotiation. Now, when you're preparing, you want to be aware that surprises can and will happen, and you want to use your negotiation to test hypotheses. You want to uncover information. You want to understand their actual needs, whether it's financial, emotional, etc., so you get them to feel safety. And you want your focus to be on the other person and what they're saying. When it comes to your tone, this is a big one. While I'm not a body language specialist, there are people that I know that get into that space. So again, build upon that from here. Smile. That's a big one. How many people don't smile enough? And then slow it down. There are 3 voices you can use. My favorite from Mr. Voss is the late night DJ voice. So that's a part of your ability to negotiate, is use your late night DJ voice. You also could use your positive and playful voice, which is a default. And you want to avoid being too direct or assertive. Put that only in very limited circumstances. And then lastly, mirroring. If you can repeat the last 3 words that someone else said, that will help you to bond with them as part of negotiations, especially in high stakes. You want to be able to use that late night DJ voice. You want to start sentences by saying you're sorry. You want to mirror what they're saying, and you want to have an element of silence as a part of the mirroring process. And then rinse and repeat. So these are some principles that he gets into in the earlier parts of the book. So feel free in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, if you have any thoughts on this. While I flip to the next slide, I would be happy to hear, have you heard of any of these principles before in any other book, any other workshop? I'd be very glad to hear from you all as I flip. So please feel free to sound off. Okay, negotiation. We have some more very key principles here. So he talks now, Mr. Voss gets into concepts of tactical empathy, of labels or labeling, neutralizing the negative, and an accusation audit. So we'll talk very briefly about these. Tactical empathy, you want to imagine yourself in the counterparts, if you're person A, person B's situation. You want to recognize their perspective. You want to understand their feelings. You want to hear what's behind the feelings. You want to bring attention to any obstacles emotionally that are inhibiting agreement. And you want to keep an eye on words, on that tone once again, and as I mentioned a little while ago, your body language. Labeling. You want to validate someone's emotion by acknowledging it. A couple key phrases he introduces, this would be a great place to take a note, is it seems like fill in the blank. It sounds like fill in the blank. It looks like fill in the blank. You want to pause and let that label sink in and let them fill the silence and not you. And the more you can label, the more often in a conversation where it naturally flows, the better off you are. And then as you're neutralizing negatives, you want to clear barriers to agreement in these high stakes battle-tested negotiations. You want to diffuse their power, and you want to observe things without being judgmental. You want to label negative feelings, and you want to replace those negative feelings with positive, compassionate, and solution-based thought patterns. So neutralize the negative as much as possible is the end game. And then we now move into an accusation audit, which is a real neat concept. So you want to be able to list the worst things that your counterpart can say about you, whatever those may be. You might say your customer service is really bad, but you're working to improve it. Or you might say that I'm normally the bull in the china shop, and you want to basically create the accusation audit and list the worst things that you feel like your counterpart in the negotiation could say about you before they say it. You want to label to reinforce and encouraging the positive perceptions. And you want to never say, I understand. That clause should be eliminated from your vocabulary as a part of an accusation audit. So those are some additional principles. We will go to the next slide where I just wanted to highlight one of many reviews of this book. I'm not going to read the whole quote to you, but Daniel Pink, for those who don't know, he is a marvelous author. He's one of my favorites. He wrote a book called Drive, one of my all-time favorite books on motivation. And he gave a glowing review to Mr. Voss's book, as you can see. And I'll tell you what I appreciate about Never Split the Difference as a book, let alone what Mr. Pink is saying. Intersectional innovation is not talked about enough, but it's very important because you're innovating and you're intersecting on two things that may not immediately appear to be interconnected, but they really are, and it can create amazing results when you intersect innovation. And in this case, Mr. Pink is a guru in motivation, Mr. Voss is a guru in negotiation, and it's an intersectional innovation. Additional principles. So now we're going to talk about starting with the word no, saying the clause or the phrase, that's right, email magic, and deadlines. So a little thoughts on these principles. First of all, when you're starting with no, you want to be able to get people to say the word no. It's counterintuitive, but when you're doing high stakes negotiation and you're having metaphorical battles, it works. Saying yes puts people on the defensive. So if you hear the word no, you can be thinking or you can be saying, what about this doesn't work for you? Or it seems that there's something here that's bothering you. And then if you start to understand why yes is not a good answer, it's because there's three types of it. There's counterfeit yes, confirmation yes, and commitment yeses. And none of these three are something you want to be a part of when you're doing high stakes negotiation. You want to trigger that no. Is now a bad time to talk? So sometimes you might even have to sort of force a counterpart into a no, and that might come from asking a ridiculous question or intentionally mislabeling an emotion. But starting with no is a key principle. That's right. Good is getting someone to say that clause. That's right. 2 words, very simple. The more you get that, the better it is. But believe it or not, this sounds awfully similar, but it's bad. You do not want to see it in your negotiations, is you do not want people to say, yes, you are right. You don't want that. You want them to say, that's right. Email magic. Feel free to type this in the chat. Feel free to jump in if you like. But how many times when you are offering proposals, RFP, RFQs to prospects, or you're attempting to work with existing clientele customers? Do you have issues with them responding to you? A few of us know a gentleman by the name of Chris Borja, and he has used this in some of his workshops, and I know others have talked about it, is the concept of ghosting, where people ghost you, okay? Email magic that Mr. Voss teaches is use this in your email. Literally, maybe put the word hi and thank you and use just this phrase, and it's magic. Have you given up on this project? Have you given up on this project? There's your magic. Deadlines. They make people do impulsive things. You want to resist the urge to rush things as they approach, but you also might be able to take advantage of the rushing in other people. So feel free to share your own, because if the information is asymmetric, it's not symmetrical, that's actually not a good thing. So they know your deadlines, that helps. And then also understand that they do make people do impulsive things. And I'm sure every single one of us has had that happen. Whether it's someone visiting on short notice, whether it's someone, a client throws something at you and expects in 24 hours, it's a part of life. So there's a few more principles. As I flip to the next slide, I encourage you to use the chat or raise your hand so Bruce sees it or I see it. Feel free if you have any thoughts or any personal stories about any of these, or if you want to go back to a previous slide while I flip here over the next couple seconds. All right, so we're now going to talk more counterintuitiveness here. So as we do that, we are going to hit the principles of 3 uses of fair. How many of us have heard about fairness? The concept of an extreme anchor, loss aversion, and being able to bend the other person's reality as a part of a battle-tested strategy. So 3 uses of fair. You can do it as a defensive move. We just want what's fair is phraseology. We just want what's fair. You can emotionally rattle someone and they'll raise a counter offer perhaps. Okay? Another example is a nefarious accusation. We've given you a fair offer. So there's different responses to either of these. There's also the third option, which is a positive use of fair. I want you to feel like you are being treated fairly at all times. So please stop me anytime you feel I am being unfair, and we'll address it. So defensive, nefarious accusation, positive are the 3 uses. And they all have their purposes and they all have correct responses. The extreme anchor. You can start to bend their reality by anchoring the starting point. You can perhaps say how bad it'll be. You can make your real number as a part of the negotiation seem more reasonable, or you can even use a range to seem less aggressive. So there's your concept of an extreme anchor. Loss aversion. People tend to take more risks to avoid a loss rather than realizing a potential gain. So make sure your person B in your battle-tested strategy sees that there is something to lose by their inaction. There is the key with the loss aversion. You may have also heard it called FOMO, fear of missing out. He doesn't say that in the book, but we can intersectionally innovate that. Also, bending the reality, which we've already hit a little bit. You want to anchor their emotions. Again, the accusation audit comes into play. You can let the other party suggest pricing. You can establish a range where you can go higher. You can pivot to non-monetary terms. You can use odd numbers as a part of your proposal, or you can even surprise people with gifts. These are all things related to counterintuitive strategies and bending reality. So we will continue with some additional strategies. There's a lot in this book. And again, I encourage you to build upon today. So we have concepts here known as calibrated questions. The question of how, the rule of three, and a very interesting formula called the 7-38-55. So we'll talk about these all briefly and let's dig in. So we talk about calibrated questioning. So you want to suspend unbelief by asking these type of questions. You do not want to use things like can, is, are, do, or does. You want to avoid those words. You want to avoid questioning that can be answered with just the word yes or with tiny bits of information. So you want to start as many questions as possible with what, with how, and maybe on occasion why, but you only want to use why in very limited circumstances. So a couple examples of using this phraseology. What makes you ask? How am I supposed to do that? How would you like me to proceed? How can we solve the problem? Those are calibrated questions. How is a great pivot off that. You've already heard me use how am I supposed to do that, or how will we know we're on track as a part of the negotiation? How will we address things if we find we're off track? The power of the how question. You want to calibrate these how questions to guarantee execution, and you want to look for that's right, which goes back to the previous slide. 7-38-55. 7% content, 38% tone of voice, 55% body language and your face. Feel free, as long as travel remains an option, to be able to be willing to fly or drive great distances to meet people in person. Pay close attention to the tone and the body language. Use labels to discover the source of the incongruence if things aren't aligned, symmetrical. So that's very, very important here. So you might ask a question like, I heard you say yes, but it seemed like there was a hesitation in your voice. These are these battle-tested strategies, because not every negotiation is high stakes, but it's a great ramp up to the ones that are, is to practice these at all times. Then lastly, rule of three, you want to get the other person, the person B, to say yes 3 times. It gets them to give you a commitment. The label and the summary will get you that's right. And you want to be able, again, to calibrate these questions so you understand what constitutes success for them. These might seem counterintuitive, but Mr. Voss proved them time and time again in very high stakes negotiations. And in every one of the chapters in the book, he gives you an example, and the examples are incredibly illuminating. So now we're going to focus on some additional approved strategies that you can trust. So let's think about these. Your own name. Mention your name as a part of the negotiation as much as you can. My name is fill in the blank. And what is fill in the blank your name discount? So the more you use your name as a part of the negotiation, the more you personalize and humanize it. And Dale Carnegie taught us many moons ago that a person's name is the sweetest sound in any language. So Mr. Voss built upon what Carnegie taught us back in the 30s. Saying no 4 times. So here's some example questions. How am I supposed to do that? We heard that one earlier. Your offer is very generous. I am sorry, but that just doesn't work for me. I'm sorry, but I'm afraid I just can't do that. Or you can even keep it simpler. I'm sorry. No. So by using the mirroring principles and the open-ended questions, you can empathize and emphasize saying no 4 times. Types of negotiators. There are 3 of them. You got analysts, accommodators, and assertive negotiators. Those 3 A words probably sound all familiar to you, so we're not going to go too deep here. But an analyst is going to be all about acquiring facts and information, is going to be more silent perhaps, thinking a little more. This person won't like calibrated questions all that much. Will be very hypersensitive when it comes to reciprocity if you offer a gift. And you're going to want to use data. Okay, you're also going to understand this person's skeptical, this person's more reserved. So there's your analyst. The accommodator loves to build relationships, enjoys making deals, understands that time creates more relationships, is very sociable, seeks out peace, is very optimistic, not the best with managing time. So watch this person's tone and body language for signs of hesitancy. So that's an accommodator at a high level. Lastly, an assertive person. For them, time equals money. They want to win more than anything else. They're most likely to get that tunnel vision mentality. They also tend to look at high stakes negotiations as intellectual sparring sessions. And be careful with reciprocity with these folks, because if you give them an inch, they tend to take a mile. So these are the assertive folks. So keep in mind these 3 types that you'll come across in your high stakes negotiations. Deflecting the punch. The counterparty to the negotiation will start with that extreme anchor that we spoke of earlier. So you want to be ready to deflect the punch by saying no. Question, how am I supposed to do that? By deflecting the anchor, what are we trying to accomplish here? You want to be able to have an ability to pivot. You might want to do that detour to those non-monetary issues. Or you may have to respond with your own extreme anchor, because some people understand the principles of anchoring, especially now that more people are learning about this book via this workshop. There's going to be more people that are going to be aware of this stuff. So be prepared that other people have been exposed to this kind of information. And that's always interesting, because you'll be even more battle tested by running into someone who's using the same principles backwards. Lastly is your I statements. A sentence you can use here is something along these lines. I feel blank when you blank because blank. So it's an I statement. You start with I. These are battle tested in negotiations that Mr. Voss went through over a period of about 20 years when he was still in the FBI. The book gets into this even more, and again, it's a fascinating concept. So we will flip here, and as always, I encourage you, if you want to share a story, feel free to jump in, type in the chat box. Be glad to field them. So now we're going to talk about bargaining and leverage. So the bargaining and the leverage concepts are things that I'm sure you've heard of, but probably not in the way that Never Split the Difference talks about. You have the principle of Ackerman bargaining, which I consider to be amazingly powerful. So Ackerman bargaining is quite the amazing thing, because what you're doing here is you are setting a target price. You are planning the offers along the way. So the buyer might be at 65%, and it'll go up to 85 to 95 to 100 in the Ackerman flow, 65, 85, 95, 100. The seller is at 135% and is dropping to 115 to 105 to 100. This is one amazing way to look at things. Setting a target price and following the Ackerman flow, the Ackerman bargaining principle. And at the final offer, you can add a non-monetary item to show that you're at your limit. You can also include the accusation audit to preempt the first offer. It takes the edge off the negotiation. You might say something like, you're going to feel insulted by my offer, or you're going to think I haven't done my homework. So you're going to knock them off base a little bit with that accusation audit, because you're going to make them think the worst about you at the outset. Use a lot of tactical empathy and use the word no a lot in between during this process. And the last principle here is using precise, non-round, odd numbers as a part of your RFP, your RFQ, your offer that you make as a part of A and B coming together in a high stakes negotiation. Black swans. There tends to be 3 of them in every negotiation. So every negotiation that you face tends to be new. So you don't want old patterns to blind you to trigger any of those many biases, perhaps cognitive dissonance that might come up. You want to be asking yourself, why are they communicating what they're communicating right now? That's a question you can ask subconsciously as a part of the black swans. There's an excellent book on black swans, by the way. He references it very briefly. We won't get into that today, but it's a wonderful, deep principle as he brings this book to a conclusion. And then we talk about types of leverage. There's positive leverage. You have something that they want. There is negative leverage, which is more powerful because of loss aversion. Okay, so your ability to make your counterpart, you're basically turning up the heat, if you will. So it's negative leverage. You also can use this to identify with labels. Here's an example. It seems you strongly value the fact that you've always been paid on time. So there's a label. So that's a part of the negative leverage. And the third and last is normative. You want to use other parties' norms to advance your own position. If their beliefs and their actions are incongruent and inconsistent, normative leverage will work for you. No one wants to be a hypocrite. You want to ask open-ended questions about what they believe in and then listen very intently. So when you understand the type of language they're speaking, you can speak it right back to them in the mirroring process. So these are some very, very impactful leveraging techniques that build upon black swans, and the Ackerman bargaining fits in very, very well. And now I have one more quote for you. This was by a gentleman that you can find on LinkedIn, Mr. Adam Grant. I follow him, and here's what he said about this book. So keep in mind that you are going to be handling a lot of high stakes negotiations that happen in a workplace, but also happen at home. A lot of us have been working from home a lot over the last 18 months. So treat home as essentially your workplace and understand that every single thing we've gone through and some of the things we didn't get to absolutely has been battle tested over 20 plus years. And while it seems counterintuitive, it works. So Mr. Grant had that to say. And we are going to start bringing this here to a conclusion. Whoops. Oh, sorry about that. Well, I will go ahead and grab those back here real quick. Let me grab those slides back. I hit that a little too fast. Sorry about that. All right, so listen, and listen some more. So we have a couple more principles here. The similarity principle, the power of your hopes and dreams, the concept of understanding crazy, and you do not want to assume. And lastly, FaceTime. And no, we're not talking about on your iPhone here. So listen. Always review things you're hearing, double check these things. You might be in a negotiation where you can get a backup listener to help you. You might be in the room with a couple people on a team. Maybe you're a business owner, founder that has a small team. Maybe you're a conventional employer in the corporate world. Maybe your startup has expanded to the point you can have a backup listener. So listen, and listen some more. The similarity principle, people tend to trust others who are in their group. So you want to understand and look at and mirror the attitudes, the beliefs, the ideas, and even perhaps how they dress. So you might be dealing with folks that are still wearing shirts, ties, and suits. You might be with people that value the concept of business casual. So it could even come down to dress. It also could just be attitudes, beliefs, and ideas. So there's your similarity principle. You also have the power of hopes and dreams. You want to visualize what the counterpart wants out of life as a part of the high stakes negotiation. And you want to display a passion for what that counterpart has wanted. And you want to convey purposeful planning on how to get there as a part of the negotiation. And you also want to be able to understand the power of getting to joy, be courageous, to draw it out, and others will follow as a part of the negotiation. Not being crazy. Very, very often people are not, even though you might assume that they are. It might just be a situation where they're ill-informed, they might be constrained by something, or they might have hidden interests that they are using to justify their behavior as a part of the high stakes negotiation. And then also keep in mind the principle we spoke a little about earlier of FaceTime. Observe unguarded moments. As you are starting a negotiation before you get down to business, the last few moments as everyone might be leaving a table, and also perhaps during an interruption or an exchange. So keep in mind that opportunity does exist. So that is the concept of FaceTime when it comes to battle-tested strategies. Last but not least, we bring it all together in the negotiation one sheet. You have a goal, you have a summary, you are doing labeling and accusation audits, you're doing calibrated questions, you're keeping in mind non-cash offers. So these are all a part of that negotiation one sheet that brings all of this content together as a part of sitting at the table with someone. So yes, there's a tremendous amount of content in this book, but it's not complicated. It's just a matter of taking action on it, which is always the key when you are professionally developing yourself, when you are becoming a lifelong learner, and you're becoming self-directed with your education outside of a classroom. So I wanted to thank you so very, very much for your time today, investing it, whether you hear live or whether you end up on a replay or recording. And now, since I wasn't able to check Q&A outside of anyone, I would be glad to take any questions. And also I'll ask Bruce if there's anything in the chat. And I really am glad to field a couple quick questions before we hand it back to Mike. So probably have enough time for 1 or 2 questions if there's any.
No questions in chat, but if anyone has a question. Oh, we do have one from Tanya. She says, any advice on negotiation on a house, which is probably one of the largest decisions someone faces?
I would look back, Tanya, to when I covered the Ackerman bargaining. If you bring out the Ackerman bargaining chip, watch the magic. There's a story in the book where Mr. Voss gets into this, where one of his students is attempting to negotiate rent on a place. And it's an amazing story what happens. This student did not have a whole lot of money, and the landlord had some huge number. And by using the Ackerman bargaining, watch what happened. It was magic. So I would point you to that. I'd also point you to the book and the story itself.
SJ, I have a quick question here. So you may have covered this. I had to step away for a couple of minutes, but I just want to get your thoughts. So, so much of this is the ability to really create a connection with the other person, through these techniques. You talked about facial expression, different things of that nature. I mean, what are you seeing, or what's your experience with kind of the mode now of doing so much? Maybe it's just a pre-work, but doing so much online through Zoom, different things like that, when you're trying to do a negotiation, or even getting to the point in this negotiation where you're actually trying to close online?
That's a great question. When Mr. Voss wrote this book, we were certainly not whatever the percentage is. Back last year, we were 100% essentially. Now we're probably still 75, 90% virtual, right? That is a question that needs to be tested in the field more. But I would say keep an eye on that Zoom square and do your best to use those principles near the end where he's talking about the 7-38-55 principle. That would be a good one to use here. 7% content, 38% tone, 55% body language. So you could pick a lot out audio-wise in virtual on Zoom or Teams or whatever. The tone of voice. Have that smile in the voice. If the person seems on edge, you'll probably be able to pick it out pretty quickly. And then, of course, keep an eye on them in the square when it comes to their body language. And then again, asking a lot of calibrated questions and being able to use those various types of leverage. So there's a lot more, Mike, that needs to be done in the field on these battle-tested strategies, because this book was written in a different world business-wise. But those are a couple things I point out.
One thing I would think about is I think about this environment being online, and I see it all the time. I mean, I've had it actually happen today. When say if I was going to meet with SJ and we were going to talk about something, and maybe we were going to a coffee shop, or I was going to SJ or he was coming to me, I kind of had to stop, and there was a gap between me doing what I was doing and then getting to have these conversations with SJ. Whereas now with Zoom, I mean, literally, I could be in the middle of something, I just stop it, I jump online. There's no gap anymore. So, you're all, in addition to dealing with, what you're talking about and trying to negotiate, you've got you may have some lingering stuff of other things that they're working on. That they haven't been able to let go of, because I mean, literally 2 minutes ago, they were working on that. So, I mean, I did that. I was at a meeting at 9, I had a meeting at 10, and we got done at 11:15. I was, jumping on here. So, there's not having that gap is an issue I think you got to be cognizant of.
I would agree. Windshield time is way down in this world. so you don't have as many gaps. And even if people, even the people who are still driving a lot, how many times, folks, have you been on a Zoom or an equivalent platform over the last 18 months? We're recording this in September of 2021, right? How many times have you been on one and the person is taking the video from their car? So absolutely. I am going to be very interested to see if Mr. Voss maybe revises this book with a chapter or two in the future, especially as we continue to figure out the trajectory of the world we live in business-wise. So I would suggest that you not only invest in the book, like I said, but I would also suggest you follow him on LinkedIn, sign up for his emails. You never know, you might see a version 2 come out, updated for the post-pandemic or current pandemic world. So great point, Mike.
We have one other question in the chat. This will be the last thing, and then we'll kind of wrap up. Mark Langford asked, how critical is the willingness to walk away from a bad deal in a negotiation process?
How important? I would say that's going to be, oh, that's a great question. A lot of subjectivity in that. I'd say walking away is not per se still a bad thing, but it's going to, a lot's going to depend on, have you employed as many of these principles as possible, and are you still having an issue bringing someone to a decision, which again is using these counterintuitive concepts. No, accusation audits, the types of leverage, understanding that we have different types of negotiators, all of these principles. So I would say, Mark, it's going to depend on, have you understanding that it's imperfect action. This is not, you know, there's no scenario with human beings that everything's going to work perfectly. But anyway, that would be my answer, is to say, use as many of these as possible, employ them in your going forward as of September 10th of 2021 and beyond, and let's see what happens. And as your speaker today, I'd be very curious to have you reach out to me and let me know how it goes. So by all means, thank you so much for the question.
Well, great. Well, I want to thank SJ for the presentation today. I think it was great information, and it was, it's what I was looking for, because I mean, there's a lot of individuals that are, really trying to figure out how to negotiate, not necessarily the best deal for them, but to negotiate a deal that, creates a win-win for everybody, so that there's, positive outcomes and everybody, gains from the deal. And, I've seen that in the sales process. I've seen that in the investment process, and trying to work out, funding levels, different things like that. So it's really important. So SJ, I want to thank you for this. As I mentioned to everybody, we are recording this. We will make it available to the folks that are here, and we will also be posting this on our site within the next week or so. So individuals that maybe weren't able to get here can jump on and pick this up. I also want to thank Chaz and the Dublin Entrepreneurial Center for being a partner in these endeavors. This is, again, it's a great partnership. And if you're not familiar with the Dublin Entrepreneurial Center, I would encourage you to go check it out. Chaz put his contact information in the chat, but you can follow him on social media at DEC, D-E-C, in Dublin. And that's also, I believe, the website, decindublin.com. So go check it out, because like I said, it's a lot of great resources. It's not just space. It's about really creating a community to support you as you go to build your business. And lastly, I want to mention that on September 23rd, we will be doing another small business breakthrough program. It'll be cool. You'll be able to find that on the DEC website, as well as the SBDC event website. And we will have Rob McAbee, who is a marketing and customer acquisition specialist, and we will be talking about, kind of how to reach your customers and things that you should be doing as a small business owner. So that's not up on our site yet, but it'll be up by the beginning of next week. So I hope to be able to see everybody there. So again, thank you guys for participating and coming today. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.